I think that's one of the big issues, is that there is a inherent skill set gap that's not trained and inspected. And as a result, chaos occasionally ensues.
Welcome, everyone. I am really excited to start off today's first podcast as the host of The Gap by GTM Buddy. Really excited to be here, and can't be any more excited than to introduce and make sure you guys are all aware of our first guest today, which is Cory Bray. He's a guy I've had several interviews with. I've talked to him many times about enablement strategy, and he's actually someone who's been doing what we call enablement since the early 2000s. So he's what we call an OG in the enablement. But he now is the co-founder of Coach CRM. He's a co-founder of Closed Loop. He has a book on sales and been an author for years. He's also part of the 212 Angels, part-time as a partner. And he's been around the block and done tons of things as far as consulting. And I thought he'd be a great guest to dive into this topic around where does the gap exist between execution and any type of strategy. So really excited to have him. If you've never heard Cory before, he also has his own podcast. I highly recommend it. And he is opinionated in the best way possible. And he's someone who I actually really enjoy and love talking to and listening to his opinions and his thoughts, because even though he's opinionated, he's a good guy with some spicy takes on things, but they're things I find refreshing, honestly. So we dive deep today into some tech when it comes to sales. What are some leadership gaps when it comes to actual execution enablement? And what are the things that enablement people themselves need to make sure they are strategically aligned? Really good conversation. Let's get going. Everyone, thank you for joining. This is The Gap podcast with GTM Buddy, and I have with me Cory Bray. My man, how are you?
Hey, doing great, Coach K. How are you, man?
I'm good. I told you before, I need to get this coach shirt. I don't have a coach shirt like you have. You're the actual coach. I'm an assistant coach. How about that?
Well, I'll tell you got to get 7 of them. And I learned last week, you should probably have 11 of them, because I was on the road going to an office in person. I was like, man, 7 does me pretty good when I'm working remote, but probably need good solid 2 weeks worth.
A few more extras to get past.
Yeah, I was wearing a dress shirt the other day, and everybody said, why are you wearing a dress shirt? I said, well, I've only got 7 coach shirts and they were all dirty and I had to go to an office. Wearing a dress shirt today. Hey,
that's awesome. You and I have talked many times before, both on LinkedIn and other podcasts, but today we get to talk about a few key things, one of which you barely said you're really just nerding out on, which is strategy.
Yeah.
But today's whole show is all about the gap between actual sales execution and then an enablement strategies and what is in that gap. So I'd love to tear down. Let's start from the beginning and define for me, when someone says the word strategy, what in the heck are they talking about? What does that mean?
I don't think they know. That's the problem.
Now, there you go. What do you,
when you think about strategy, okay, one of the frameworks I love that I learned in school that I've used all throughout my career is goals, strategies, and tactics.
Yep.
And you've got a goal, maybe you've got 1, maybe you've got 3, shouldn't have more than 3. And then you decompose your goals into strategies, and then you decompose your strategies into tactics. So for example, if the goal for the company is to double revenue in the next 24 months, okay, very good. What are the 3 strategies that we're going to use to get there? Maybe we're going to hire more salespeople, build a better product, and change our pricing and packaging. Cool. What are the tactics that we're going to employ to support each one of those strategies? That's the stuff we're actually going to do. So if we use the framework of goals, strategies, and tactics, and we admit that the goal is something that is organizational wide, it's not a department goal, it's something that the company has, then it becomes pretty ridiculous and silly to think that strategy exists outside of the executive leadership team. That's my take. And so when people say strategy, especially when they're in a manager role or director role, no offense, but I think they're just talking above their pay grade.
So you think that applies with enablement then? They're thinking they're being strategic when they're actually more tactical execution?
I think they need to be tactical. I think that's the whole point. The whole point is to support the strategy that's being set forth, because the goal is being set by the CEO, the board of directors, with influence from the executive leadership team.
Yep.
The strategy is being set by the executive leadership team with influence from their reports, and the tactics are being executed by the company at large, depending on who's doing what and what those actual tactics are. So just because it's the biggest thing within your group doesn't necessarily mean organizationally wide. It really falls at the strategy level. So I just love using frameworks like that, because it helps ground you and helps you really understand, does this make sense? And as Judge Judy has said for 30 years, If it doesn't make sense, then it's probably not right.
So then is it an oxymoron to say enablement strategy?
Yes. I don't think that enablement strategy is a thing.
Ooh, let's talk. I'm gonna get spicy here. Okay.
That's
So
my
is it
take.
possible then?
I'm open. I mean, I changed my mind.
Yeah.
I'm open to
Let's
change.
talk about it. So
Yeah.
if you have like the overall strategy of doubling revenue in a year, as an
Yeah.
example.
Sure.
So everyone has their strategy saying hire more people, product
That's the
fit,
goal. So
prices.
the goal
That's
is
the
double
goal.
revenue in a year.
That's the goal. So the strategy, they decide on hiring more people, product, market fit, redesign, whatever they talk about. Then each team has their tactics underneath that. Is it possible to have a strategy within a strategy that is then guiding the enablement team or marketing or whoever the case might be?
Let's break it down. Let's see if we can get there. Let's do it
Okay,
organically. So
let's do it.
if the goal is to double revenue in the next 18 months, period, whatever.
Yep.
Okay. So hire more salespeople. Let's just peel that one off because that seems like a good one to use, right? We don't
Right.
have enough quota capacity with our current team, so we need more people in the world, right? If we hire more salespeople, what do we need to do? We need to find them. We need to recruit them. We need to get them to accept offers. We need to
Mhm.
onboard them. We need to ramp them. We need them to be productive. We need to coach them, whatever. So there's lots of things that we need to do. All those things are tactics. Yeah, we have a collection of tactics that we need to execute on. So from a project management perspective, we need to put those in some kind of prioritization and how we're going to do it and who's going to do all this type of stuff. But again, that's not strategy. That's just organization of tactics.
I'm gonna
crazy or what are you thinking?
No, not crazy at all. I think there's a difference between enablement strategy and then strategic enablement. I think there's a big difference between the two.
Oh,
As an example, if you break down execute, let's go higher picture the strategy first. So do you know Kunal Pandya? Do you know him at all?
I,
Familiar with Kunal?
I don't know. Maybe.
You,
What's
you
he do?
probably are. Like he's a enablement leader over in England. He's fascinating, but very strategic minded in general. But
Cool.
in the sales velocity labs, let me tell you broadly what we do. So we look at what's the overall revenue goal, which is usually a goal of the revenue team is revenue goal for the year.
Yep.
Sit backwards and take a look at sales velocity specifically of opportunities, close ratio, deal size, and then sales cycle. And then take a look backwards from there and say, what are the things that enablement has influence over that can impact sales velocity, impacts the goal, whether that's competency, skills, behavior, tools, whatever.
Yep.
And then aligning that with sales leaders to say, okay, here's what we see from the data that these are the most important skills for this KPI for this result to happen. And that becomes the foundation of your enablement program that is all guiding towards the overall revenue goal. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So in that way, what I call strategic enablement is enablement tactics aligned to the bigger revenue goal.
Yeah,
Makes
it's
sense?
aligning them to the revenue goal. So in my mind, what I'm hearing is you've got a strategy that you're trying to execute on, which let's say hire more people, double the size of the team just to make it easy.
Right.
There's lots of stuff that you can do and you only have limited bandwidth to do things. You've got limited risk tolerance because you don't want to go wild. If we're not going to make an offer until we find the best salesperson out there, well, that's silly because they're not going to want to come work for you. So that's
Right.
not going to go anywhere. So you got a risk tolerance issue. And then you got to show some kind of quick wins. Otherwise people are going to say, what are these people doing over here?
Exactly.
So all that stuff adds up to, yeah, I think that, and this is, okay, so this boils down to one of the biggest issues where I see enablement teams make and break, which is project management skills. And if you listen to the folks that say enablement folks have to come up through sales, cool. And then you listen to the folks that say salespeople don't need college degrees, salespeople don't need technical backgrounds, you get them out of liberal arts programs, whatever. Okay.
Right.
So nothing wrong with that. Just stating those things as facts of common conversation that lots of people have.
Yep.
Where along that journey does somebody develop really strong project management skills? It doesn't happen. So then who's responsible for making it happen? You take somebody that studied whatever in college that didn't have anything to do with project. They're a BDR, they're an AE, they might become a sales manager, and then they go into enablement. They don't have that skill set. And what we're talking about here is a collection of tactics to support the strategy that need to be executed upon. That requires pretty good project management skills, especially in a more complex organization. So I think that's one of the big issues is that there is a inherent skill set gap that's not trained and inspected. And as a result, chaos occasionally ensues.
Chaos ensues. You're correct. So that comes, would you say then that's an execution issue? Or is that based on wrong data you're relying on? What's the core, not the symptom, what's the core?
I think the core is leadership scoping the enablement role and determining exactly what, because if you think about we talk about competencies a lot for salespeople, competencies for an enablement person.
Yep.
Where are they at? When I talk about companies, there's lots of ways to talk about companies. I like to look at each one and say, is it something that's acquired where they're good at it now, or is it something that's
Right.
developing and they haven't quite got there yet?
Right.
Or maybe it's not even on their radar. That's fine too. Can't change it. It's just facts at this point. So do we have an enablement department full of folks that have really strong project management skills? Probably going to hit the ball out of the park. Or are they relying on intuition? And it's wild because change management, project management, those types of things, what's obvious isn't always right.
It's true. That is very true. So coming back down to the execution part of it, because first off, I think we align on this, but do you agree that currently, as a mass market whole, there is a gap that exists between what revenue teams are trying to accomplish, which is revenue, and then what enablement teams are doing in general? And that gap exists, which usually comes down to some sort of execution, or at least applied execution to the strategies. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's something else?
I think incentives are not necessarily aligned
Yeah.
always. I think that happens across the org. So you've
Yeah.
got a salesperson and frontline sales manager who is focused on this quarter.
Yep.
Often a VP that's focused on this quarter. And if we're halfway through the quarter, there's so little that enablement can do that can actually have an impact this quarter.
Right.
It's wild. So you already have some tension there. Because enablement, I don't want to go off on tangents. One small tangent.
Right.
When I look
Small
at
tangent.
enablement, there's two major functions. There's build and there's operate. You need to build programs, you need to operate programs. The building of programs is more like a product management role where you're designing and rolling out, and it could be anything from a
Yep.
sales process to coaching framework to methodology to onboarding program, whatever it is. You create it, and then you've got to execute it week in, week out, quarter in, quarter out. Challenge there is that people that like and are good at building stuff want to go build the next thing, not go operate the thing that they just built for the
Right.
next 3 quarters. So
Right.
you got that challenge that's put into the mix as well, on top of the fact that the people we're enabling are focused on the next 2, 4, 8, up to 13 weeks. And we're doing stuff that's going to have long lasting impact over the course of 2, 3, 4 quarters.
Right. So where's the balance then?
That's where leadership believing in the investment and being able to align everybody's expectations around, look, we're making this investment in the enablement. You can't raise your child. You can't raise 18 children in 1 year.
That's right.
Nine women can't have it in 1 month. It's just the teamwork doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that, huh? Not enough room.
Yeah, it's physics and biology challenges sometimes. So a mix, and this goes back to the project management piece, right? Do we
Right.
need quick wins? Yes. So is the sales team not setting next steps coming out of their meetings? Let's fix that now, but that's not something that requires a bunch of meetings and work and effort. Assessment, do they know how to do it? If they know how to do it, then they need some coaching. If they don't know how to do it, they probably need some training. Cool. That's something that can be fixed in a week. That's not hard.
Right.
Maybe something that's more difficult. Are they using mutual action plans with enterprise customers? You're going to fix that in a week. That's going to take a little bit longer. And then if you look at something longer term, rolling out methodology, implementing car recording software and scorecards and driving coaching coming out, yeah, that's going to take longer because you got to do a bunch of things. Everybody knows what they are. I'm not going to walk through the steps. So can you get some quick wins sprinkled in there along with the longer term things and allow for at least some of the tactical work to have a long-term time horizon associated with it? So you're not just constant firefighting, trying to put out stuff that's impacting this quarter right now.
Yeah.
Because if you do, that's just where you're going to live forever because you're never going to get to the long-term stuff.
Taking that kind of same concept, but going larger. So not just talk about the enablement, but when you go into teams and you bring your skills, your knowledge, your training, your tools, and we're talking about this revenue team in general, just the sales team in general.
Yep.
What gets in the way of them actually executing on whatever plans it's going to get them there? It's just all the busy work. What do you find that's getting in the way usually?
That's getting in the way of sales teams executing.
Yeah.
I can say this to you because we're generalizing. What
Yeah.
also in the way is the product sucks.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's bad. Maybe it's bad. Sometimes it's bad. Man, some people build some stuff that just doesn't exist.
Right.
And then you get things that, so the product market fit isn't what they think it is. Well, let's just put it like that.
Got it.
If the product doesn't do everything that the customer wants it to do, then your sales team has a ton of friction that they need to overcome. And how do they do that? Discounts. Or the market's challenging because there's 3 other companies out there that do exactly what you do. You're real into AI. You see these AI wrapper companies out there. There's 20
All the time, man.
do the
Yep.
exact same thing.
Mhm.
And they say they're creating categories. I was like, okay, all of you are creating categories at the same time. Cool. Got it.
Right. Not very unique, but yeah, I get it. So
No.
besides that though,
So product's the first thing. And then execution's the second thing, which is, are they squeezing the most juice out of the orange? Because when we look at the types of customers, prospects that are out there, you put them in 3 buckets. People are never going to buy from you. People are going to buy from you no matter what. So these are the folks that use Salesforce at their last company. They're going to use Salesforce at their next company. They're going to buy. And then there's the folks that may or may not buy. And it's unclear when that decision is going to be made. So that's where sales can have an impact. Poor sales execution reduces the probability that a deal is going to be won. It lengthens the sales cycle. It decreases the deal size. Better sales execution makes all of those metrics look better. So that little sliver there of people that might buy from us and they might buy now or they might buy later, that's where we can hone in. So within the areas where we do have good product market fit, just dialing in and nailing execution there, which goes back to another skill set that Enablement needs to have, which question is, look at your team. Where did they acquire the skill set before? Or are they just relying on intuition, which is analytical skills?
Yep.
So of all the things, of all the deals, of all the meetings, of all the people, where is the lowest hanging fruit that we can impact? Where's the second? Where's the third? Where's the fourth? Let's stack rank that. Let's look at effort of fixing and let's look at impact of fixing. And we got to do a little trade off there because maybe the biggest impact thing is also the hardest one to do, but we want to get a quick wins knocked out of the park first. And that's where it is, man. So analytical skills and project management are not strategic. Those are tactical things. And you take all the stuff that needs to be done, wrap them into analytical skills, wrap them into project management skills, and just ding, ding. My brother says that. That's his just winning noise.
The winning noise.
And then you just knock it out and you support the strategy. You're not going in and like creating another organization and strategic vision and all of this stuff. Ain't the job. Sorry.
Yeah.
My 2 cents. That's just me.
That's okay. I like the 2 cents. So then
it's like Dennis Miller does these rants and he's, but maybe I'm wrong.
But maybe I'm full of it. I don't know who's knows. But then coming down to a product market fit and the people who are in whatever mode of buying, both those are out of control of sales. So my question is, of the things that's in control of sales, whether that's enablement, leaders, whatever, what's in
the execution thing I went through,
which is what gets in the way most of the time? Why are they not executing? Because so many times execution is the piece that they're not doing. So
okay, let's rattle this off. And look, everybody's out there. We don't have notes. We're not cutting this. This is all live. This is
we're just going.
We're just going. So first thing, target market. Are we talking the right companies?
Yeah.
Yes or no? If you're talking the wrong companies, you're toast from the get-go. Chasing things that don't exist. Then personas. Are we talking the right people inside those companies? Or are we trying to do this cute little bottoms up sale because that's who will talk to me? Yeah, sure. Get information from those folks. Talk to them if you can. Use them to navigate. But if you don't have a way to navigate from the bottom up that's repeatable and actually works, then I question why that's a tactic. Persona's competitive landscape. Do we understand specifically how we win against our competition? Not how we can go out and there and just say we're better than them for these reasons, but how do we integrate good discovery questions based on our understanding of how we win against competition? That's absolutely key. Customer stories for each target market segment and each persona combination. Do we have a really good customer story that the salespeople actually know and they can deliver live?
Right.
And discovery questions. So I'm going to this conversation. I'm meeting with Jonathan that works at company XYZ. Do I have 6 really good pain points that he probably has that I can weave into my discovery questions? Can I do that? Can I do it on the fly? Can I at least pre-meeting prep enough that I can execute on that? And then when he comes back to me with resistance and objections, do I A, anticipate what those could be, B, understand how to have the conversation when that stuff comes up? And then if we get to the point where we've done some discovery and we understand that they've got some pain, maybe a reason to do business with us, we move on to some kind of demo or presentation. Can I do that in a compelling way that drives the deal forward, continues with discovery? And at the end of each meeting, we have really clear next steps that advance our sales process, whatever our exit criteria are inside of each stage. So we're doing pipeline management along the way, make sure deals are in the right stage, right value, have the right exit criteria. It's all this stuff that's just super simple in its pieces. And if someone has the right analytical skills to go in and look for these right things, they can be like, okay, cool. So these 3 things are having the biggest impact. No agendas, no next steps, no pain. Okay. what's the level of effort to get these things fixed? Getting people to set agendas is the easiest thing in the world because a prospect shows up to a meeting, they want to talk, they'll talk to you, so you can set an agenda with them. Next steps is
Right.
pretty easy. Uncovering pain is pretty easy if you're good at it. And then taking all that stuff and fiddling it all together and making it work. And it's
Right.
a little project management. So yeah, it's all just analytical skills and project management skills. That's it, with
Over and
sales
over.
fundamentals sprinkled in.
Yep. When you go into places, then how many of the teams when you go into to talk with them are actually doing all that, actually executing? And if they're not, why aren't they?
They don't give me money if they're doing all that. Yeah,
That's the point. I was like,
yeah,
obviously they're not. So what's in the
they're
way?
not.
Just systems, tools, process? What is it?
I think there's companies that had done it in the past,
Mhm.
and there's companies that never did it from the beginning. And the companies that never did it from the
Right.
beginning are often hot products, hot markets, rising tide floats all boats.
Yep.
I don't want to name names, but there's a lot of these companies out there that are pretty big right now. Their salespeople are terrible.
Yeah, they're
They
horrible.
show up to a meeting and they say, "Here's what we've got. Do you want it? I'll give you a 30% discount if you sign by the end of the quarter." And they do it,
Right.
but it works. And they hit
Yep.
quota. Then they go on LinkedIn and they sell you their course for $159 because the last place they worked at had a really good product market fit. And
Mm,
at that time, the rising tide floated all boats. So that's one reason why people don't execute well. On the other side, maybe they used to, and they got away from it a little bit because management wasn't doing that operational thing we talked about before. There's the
right.
build and there's the operate, and people get shiny object syndrome. They say, we're gonna get away from this weekly coaching. I'm not gonna listen to calls and inspect the pipeline and really diagnose and prioritize what to coach each person on. I'm gonna go work on this new tool, or I'm gonna expand into Europe or Australia or whatever it is, and get
Yeah.
distracted and then lose track of the fundamentals. This happens in every instance of fundamentals in the world, from sports to business and so on. So the distraction from the core fundamentals and repeatability is lost. But then you come across companies that have to do it, companies that are low margin businesses. And
Right.
look, if they don't have venture funding, they don't have high margins. Those are the ones that you see executing oiled machines because look, they don't
They have
execute,
to.
companies gone.
Right.
You know,
Do you feel like the tech stack and AI specifically, because we didn't get to talk about this last time, is it helping? Is it getting in the way? What do you think where the things are going?
I think AI simultaneously makes people smarter and dumber,
Huh? I would
which is
agree.
an interesting paradox.
Yep.
It makes them smarter in the way that it gives them access to better, broader, and deeper information quicker. So it's just what you need right now. Cool. But at the same time, it does a lot of the work for you. And so you lose some of those fundamental skills. Imagine a kid that grew up never learning how to multiply or divide and only relied on a calculator.
Right.
Well, they're not going to be very good at math. And they're definitely not going to be able to do a 15% discount on a $35,000 deal off the top of their head when a prospect asks them. So
Let's have
that's
an AI sub guest copilot go bing.
exactly.
You're
You
good to
just get
go.
overly reliant on it. And then,
Yeah.
and once you're overly reliant on something that doesn't have a omnipresent situation going on where it's always doing everything that you need it to, then
Right.
you run into pickles. So yeah, I think AI is good. I think it's helpful. I think for most use cases, it's a feature. It's not a product. It's definitely not a company at this point,
Yeah.
unless you're actually the model developer. That's my take.
So what if you had a choice with the execution piece, if
Yeah.
there's an AI that could help with that, what would you wish to choose to become an execution AI tool?
I don't think people need execution AI live. I don't think it's useful.
No? How come?
I think because the minute you run into an edge case that it's not trained on, the whole system just crashes.
Mm,
And humans are good at dealing with edge cases. Computers aren't today.
yeah.
But the minute computers are really good at dealing with all edge cases, we're probably not needed anymore.
Which is true. But what about the stuff that can complement execution? For example, you were talking about before of the customer stories, and then you
Yeah.
have discovery questions and all this stuff. Like most salespeople that I know of, they don't have these board of questions. They go, oh, they don't have that up
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
they have to
Yeah.
use some sort of text. So what is the ideal motion where they can have the in-time enablement content, whatever you want to call it, so you can
I
have what they
get
need?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So here's my opinion on that. If you're selling Lenovo computers,
Right.
you should definitely have that because you've got 1,000 things in inventory You've got tons of different use cases. You got different channels that you sell through. There are so many permutations and combinations of the type of conversation that you could be having. Something like
Right.
that is incredibly helpful. If you're selling call recording software to sales teams, you got to learn this stuff. It's not that hard. I always ask
Yeah.
people, I say, when we're doing sales training with teams, one of the questions I ask early on is I say, does anybody know what mitochondria is? And they're like, oh, yeah, powerhouse to sell. Okay, cool. What's photosynthesis? "Oh, it's light. Plants turn light into energy. Okay, cool. So you know that stuff that you learned 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that's completely useless, has never made you a dime. To get really good at sales execution, you need to know about 20 fundamental things and maybe 200 advanced topics to really just completely nail it. Human brain's very capable of doing it. You don't need
Yeah.
AI. Yeah, I think you need AI for, like I said, if you've got tons of SKUs or tons of channels and tons of use cases and all that type of stuff. But if you're selling a widget to a persona, just, you got to learn it. Don't rely on, don't use crutches when you don't need to. Otherwise your muscle's going to atrophy and you're going to be useless.
Do you feel like, though, that sometimes the things we're requiring salespeople to do is based on the limits of technology at the time? Give me an example. Let's just talk about data entry into CRMs, which everyone has to do.
Yeah.
When you can have that be automated, so then the salesperson can actually freaking focus on the phone call and really understand what's going on, would that not be a help? Or do you feel like that's more of, like you said, a crutch they would then rely on to not understand things?
So here's the crutch. Okay. So let's talk about that. That's a good question. It helps get the data into the system so the executives know what's going on.
Right?
It makes it easier for the salesperson to do that. So they have to do less critical thinking as they put the data into the system. So when we ask the salespeople questions like, okay, what should we do next? Well, that's pretty easy. So they probably have a good handle on that. What are the 3 things that could go wrong with this?
Mhm.
Okay. Why haven't we navigated to persona X? Why haven't we opened up discovery around use case Y? All of these things that are more critical thinking skills. If the data is automatically pushed over there and it's out of sight, out of mind for them, they're not going to be thinking about this stuff as hard. So I think that getting them to wallow in the notes a little bit and really think through the deal is important. Now, there can be an argument made that, hey, they don't have to physically type those. Okay, sure, maybe. But getting the computer to take over the notes, but not have the salesperson apply the same critical thinking skills that they would if they were creating and crafting the notes themselves.
Yep.
I think that's negative.
Yeah. I'm just curious if there's a way you could balance them, because if you think about the time, I'll give you an example. There's some places I've been at where the CRO loved fields in Salesforce. And so the salespeople hated it because you had 20 bajillions. Like we had, I can't remember, it
Yeah.
was like 85 or something like that. And we,
Oh, gross.
after you left, we whittled it down to 15 or 20 or something like that. But anyways,
Yeah,
while
yeah.
he was there though, it took a lot of freaking time to put that in there. And so time wasted, not in front of customers, data entry. So they're thinking,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, I could be spending more time with actually freaking talking to somebody versus having to put all this data entry
Well,
in.
I
So,
buy that. That's
but
dumb having 80 fields in there. People that have account plans and slides. So if your boss makes you do account plans and slides, that's dumb.
what would you prefer? I
I
agree with you, but I'm just asking.
The whole point of a CRM is to have all this. Okay, so
Yeah,
I don't have account plans in the CRM. Why do you put it in a slide?
I don't know either. That doesn't make any sense to me either,
It's
but I understand.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. 85 fields is terrible. So when I think about the CRM, just broad strokes. So we've got an opportunity. So deal in HubSpot, opportunity in Salesforce.
Mhm.
All right. So we've got its created date when it was created. We got its modified date the last time it was updated. We've got the prospect name, company name tied to an account. So we got 4 things so far.
Mhm.
And then we've got the close date, 5. We got the amount. We got the next step, 7. We got the next step date, which I would like to have in there. It's 8.
Right.
We've got the pain that we're solving, which I like to have as a specific field because that helps us inspect the deal.
The deal.
That's
Right.
9. And a couple other things I like to have in there is what outstanding resistance or objections are we facing, or do we anticipate, just so we can have not just rose-colored lenses and say, hey, this is great. What could go wrong with this deal? So that gets us at 10. And then we can do some combination of additional discovery notes, which puts us at 11 and I'm done. Or if you want to break it down for bigger deals, more enterprisey deals, whatever your deal
Right.
qualification framework is, whether it's resources from Triangle Selling or Medic, or you
Whatever.
can put it
Yeah.
in there too and have that reportable. So that gets you up to about 15 fields, 16 fields. depending on what it
Right.
is. But anything more than that is for finance. It's for
Crazy.
non-salespeople.
Yes.
So why?
It's other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the question then is, could you have a balancing? So I'm seeing from a lens of there's a lot of data in conversations with customers that could
Yeah.
be extrapolated from competition to marketing to objections to all this stuff that you don't necessarily have to have a sales rep put in. So maybe there's a balance between you're responsible for these 10, 15 fields, and then there's 60 other ones we can automate for all the other
Yeah.
content.
For
So
sure.
yeah,
And I that what you could do is you could present it to the salesperson and let them make the decision because they're the owner of the deal and say,
right,
hey, you talk to this prospect based on the conversation. Here's what we're thinking about notes: approve, reject, modify.
right.
I'm good with that. Yeah. The busy work's not the point. I think the getting getting salespeople to think critically about their deals is very important. That's the hill that I'm dying on.
Yeah, I get that. So when the argument is then if an AI takes away from the critical thinking skills, that's the issue,
Correct. Then it's a coaching opportunity for management. But
right?
if all of the other things that we're talking about aren't happening, then that's probably not happening either.
So let me give you an example, and this goes into content management systems, for example. Like I've been in teams where probably 15 to 20 different products, and each one of those could be adapted in several different ways depending on the industry. So like you had all these different use cases, all these different customer stories. Like it's impossible for a salesperson to understand that. In classic content management systems, you have someone has to go search either like a Google Drive or some whatever legacy tool. Takes them forever to find it, and then they don't find the right one. Whereas an AI can understand the context of the deal and say, "Hey, you're talking to CFO of a bank in North America, New York, with whatever stage. Bam,
Yeah.
here's your customer story." That to me is not a critical thinking skill. It's a
No,
time
I'm
wasting
I'm
because I have
good
no
with
idea
that.
where they're going.
I'm
And
good.
you're
I'm
okay with
good.
that.
I'm good with that. But
Yeah,
okay, so since we're having fun here, so I'm good with
yeah.
that in general. My question would be, why do you have a salesperson that's selling to 20 different use cases?
Well,
So
it's a good question.
can we
Yeah,
specialize the salespeople? And then the second one is, man, I've got some buddies. I'm sure these guys too.
yeah.
They're like, who was the 1984 NFC MVP runner up?
Mm.
They
I
know
don't
the
know.
answer. They
Yeah,
know the answer that I don't know. I don't even who knows, but
but they
people
do.
stuff like that.
Yeah,
So if you're in a world where you're selling things to tons of, so if the sale, if the job description, this goes back to competencies. If the job description is you're selling tons of products to tons of use cases, why don't you go hire a trivia savant who can actually learn that stuff?
who knows all this stuff inside and out? Yeah,
Yeah, and can learn it because it's not that hard to learn. It takes tens of hours, maybe a couple hundred of hours, but there's 168 hours in a week. And if somebody knows there are unlimited people out there that can tell you the starting lineup of any team. They can tell you the ranking of the divisions last year in every major sport, what
yeah.
mascots. I've got this one buddy,
All
he
this
can,
stuff.
you name a college, he'll tell you what their mascot is. That's his party trick. And
That's
yeah, how
awesome.
many colleges are there? 250 or so?
200 ever. Yeah.
Yeah. So that becomes a recruiting question. But I think the more important question is, why do you have a salesperson selling 20 products into a bunch of different use cases? I'd probably streamline that first.
And if you have to have it, then just obviously hire to the competency you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I don't think, yeah, exactly. And but again, that's an enablement tactic. There's no strategy there. The strategy, okay. So the strategy is, do we hire one person that's selling everything, or do we hire somebody that's going to sell specific products in specific markets? That is strategic. I'll give you that. But how
Yeah.
we onboard and train and enable them, that's tech.
I think last time when we spoke, it was off the podcast, but it was something I was fascinated with, which we could probably end with this, but I'd love to have you deep dive. A few months ago, you were going to be critiquing some enablement programs on winning an award. And so I asked you, I was like, what are you looking for a good enablement program for you to say that is a class A enablement program? And you broke down what you said that was like, which to me is like screams execution. You want
Yeah.
to break that down for me again, saying what if you had a class A enablement program and you were grading it, what would
Yeah.
it contain?
Analysis on the front end
Mhm.
of what are all the things that what's the current state of the world? And I think the current state of the world is, what's the current state of the world given where we're at now? And then what's the state of the world given where we're going 24 months from now? Because if we're going to
Yeah.
double the size of the sales team, we need to take that into account as we do an assessment of the current state of the world.
Right.
What are all the things that we could do? What's the possible impact and what's the possible risk of all those things that we could do? And then take those and stack rank them and say, all right, well, what are we going to do? When are we going to do them by? What outcome are we looking for? Who's responsible for it? What's the risk
Mhm.
of it? And then how are we going to operationalize it once we're done? If it's a build thing, how are we going to make sure that it actually lives beyond our build?
Supports it.
Because I think I also told you in that thread that it seems like the number of people reinventing the wheel and rebuilding stuff, you'll see this over and over again. Oh, I went into
Happens
a
a lot.
1,000-person company and they had nothing and I built it from scratch. I was like, no, that's not true. Cause I know someone that worked there before and they also built it from scratch. And then you just didn't adopt what they built.
All right. Had to rebuild it.
Yeah. Yeah. Building stuff's easy, man. That's the easiest thing out of all this. Onboarding new hires, especially junior people, building new stuff. Those are the easiest things that you can do
Yep.
because it's blank paper exercise. And you can show progress fast. Now, taking something that kind of works and making it work, that's harder. Taking a senior person, making them better, that's harder. Taking a manager or a second line manager, making them a really good coach, that's harder. So I think the question from executive leadership is, are we pushing our enablement programs to not only just take the low hanging fruit and execute on things that are fairly straightforward, but are we
Right.
also in that stack rank of our opportunities coming out of the assessment, looking at things that can really have a big impact that might be harder, that might have more risk, but it's worth it.
Right. I like that. Do you feel like that people just get distracted of why that doesn't happen? Because let me tell you what I'm seeing on my side as far as the enablement space is that a common scenario is that a CRO or a sales leader will hear something on a call or something like discovery call, negotiation, something.
Yeah.
And because it was so horrible, they'll be like, this is the problem across the whole field. So now we got to redo our methodology or discovery or something. So then their focus becomes discovery, which is not analysis based. It's just gut instinct because of this one experience. That happens all the time. So then they go to enablement saying, hey, we need discovery training. So the enablement says, okay, cool. I'll do it because you're my boss. I don't want to get fired. They do
Yeah.
this discovery training. Nothing changes because it wasn't the actual problem. That happens all the time. But what you were saying, which I love, is that number one, really understanding the analysis. And then two is projecting forward saying, here's where we are. This is what we're planning on happening. I don't hear that happen a lot with a lot of enablement programs is they don't ever say, we're expecting this result because of this thing. They're saying, we're doing this because we think discovery is a problem. So does that make sense? Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
feel like that is the thing that you hear a lot? Like, I don't know if you deal with a lot of enablement programs when you go into places, but that happening a lot?
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
That I'm going to do this because I was told to do this thing happens a lot. I
Yeah.
think that's another skill set. How do you push back on senior people?
Yeah.
Do we have that skill set on the team? And is that a culture that we've, first of all, when I interview to take the job, is that something I'm inspecting to understand if it exists or not? Or am I just here to take orders and say, would you like fries with that? I think here's another thing that ties into exactly what you're talking about, which is the speed at which the analysis is done.
Yep.
Because when people say analysis, they can be like, oh, geez, this is another thing. Well, I don't know. If you gave me, so let's say you had a team of, I don't know, 50 people, 50 salespeople. Give me one call from each of them with AI and coffee and maybe Diet Dr. Pepper.
Uh-huh.
I can have you a pretty comprehensive analysis done in 24 hours. Doesn't require any meetings, but it only works if we know what we're looking for. And so
Right.
then the question is, do we have a sales methodology? Do we not have a sales methodology? If you don't have a sales methodology, then okay, let's look for broad things, just generally speaking. Are they setting
Right.
agendas? Are they uncovering pain? Are the demos conversations or presentations? Are they setting next steps? Are they getting to the right people in the meetings? What's their talk time look like? All that type of stuff that's just generic and applies to everything. Or if they have a sales methodology rolled out, are they executing the sales methodology? And on a scale of 1 to 10, not doing it versus doing it perfectly, where are we at across
Right.
the people, across the teams, across the company, whatever. And then come back with the result and say, hey, CRO, I know that you said that you want discovery training. I did this analysis. Here were my findings. I think that we should do X because of Y. That's an adult business conversation, and they'll respect the heck out of that, unless they're a bozo, because some people are, and that's fine.
Some
But
people are. Yeah.
generally speaking, that's the approach that I would take.
And if I remember correctly, when we talked about the awards thing, that's essentially what you look at for enablement programs in general is just saying, what did you find? How'd you execute? Did it work? If it didn't, how'd you adjust? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Project management. That's it.
yeah,
Analysis and project management. It's funny. I didn't think of that coming into this meeting, but it's not strategy.
yeah.
It's analysis and project management to build and operate the tactics that support the strategy. Boom, dunzo.
Dunzo, that's the phrase. Love it.
If you want to do strategy, be a CRO. Cool. Look,
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with not doing strategy.
Yeah.
It sounds fancy, but sure, it's not.
But to your point, though, and kind of what I was saying before, I still think though that some enablement programs are not aligned to the overall goals, to the strategy.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think that's where the problem lies. Is that the gap for me, anyways, is when you have the tactics, they're not aligned, so they're just going all over the place. You're like, what are you doing? The strategy is this
Doing
way. Doing stuff, making cool pictures on decks, stuff.
Yeah, don't make that yeah, I know. Yeah, that's part of the thing, right? So if I go do an analysis and I find that we have inconsistent next steps, we don't have good pain, our discovery notes in our CRM are weak, win rates are low, deal sizes are small, deal cycles are long. In what world am I making a slide?
That's true.
I can defend if it's a complex topic that people get lost with verbally, architecture, implementation, sure. Have a slide for architecture, have a slide for implementation. Am I making a deck with some cutesy little picture that tees up the next one talking about our logos? No, get lost. Give people
Yeah.
some next steps.
Let's do next steps. I love it.
It's not hard.
Well, what I'm gonna have you leave me with something for the because the audience of the show is both the revenue leaders and then for enable leaders. I think you already said it before. It just comes down to understanding where you're at. But what would be the thing you'd have them leave with saying, okay, if you left and did one thing this week to look at execution, what would that one thing be?
Write down all the things that you want your team doing, and then go inspect what they're doing against that list of
That thing.
things. Where that? And if you want a simple rubric, I hate that I used 1 to 10 a second ago because I do that when I talk about sales methodology execution because it shows a big gap. So say a 4 versus a 10.
Yep.
The rubric I love more than anything, rubric wise. I love other things way more than this. Puppies, Yorkies, Shorkies,
Dr. Pepper. Yeah.
Diet Dr. Pepper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Pepper's good too. 23 flavors.
There you go.
I think that's part of being from Texas is you just have this. I was living in Argentina for 2 months earlier this year. They didn't have Dr. Peppers. And so I got back.
Oh, you got back
I
and
got off
loaded
the
up.
plane. Hillman, my co-founder, called me and he said, "Are you back?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Guess where I am?" And he said, "Where are you? Give me one clue." I said, "I couldn't get it in Argentina." He said, "Chick-fil-A." I said,
There you go.
"You got it, man."
The Diet Dr. Pepper.
I'm having a Diet Dr. Pepper at Chick-fil-A. I took an Uber from the airport to Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A to Diet Dr. Pepper. You just
I love
things
it.
you miss when you're abroad.
That's right.
So the rubric is 0, 1, 2. Did not do it. 0, did it. 1, 2, did it well. So that way there's no debates between what's the difference between a 2 and a 3. There's no
Yep.
debates over was it a yes or was it a no if it's binary. So binary is terrible because I was talking to a client and she said that they did a binary thing because they
Mhm.
didn't ask me about the rubric question, which is fine. They did a binary thing. And she's
Right.
like, it's really interesting because our predictive, she just noticed this correlation between the manager's disc scores, whether they were D's or C. I think there was a
Yeah.
big difference between the D's and the C's. She was like, the C's were very forgiving and the D's were just saying everything was negative. I was like, just throw 0, 1, 2 in there. It solves your problem. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Didn't do it, did it well. Use that for calls, for anything that's being executed, notes in the CRM, rolling out some qualification framework, give people examples of what bad, good, and great looks like. And then from there, but it's still like the last thing I'll say on this, I know we got to roll. One
Yep.
of the most important things I learned from product management, because in addition to loving sales, I also love building products, is time boxing.
Yep.
And I'm going to spend a maximum of 30 minutes on this, maximum of 2 hours on this, a maximum of 4 2-hour sessions on this. And if you force yourself to time box, it's like moving. Whenever you move from house to house, it takes as long as you let it. If you let it last 2 weeks, it's going to last 2 weeks. If you force it to be done in one day, you might be up until 3 a.m, but it will be done in one day.
Yep.
Same thing with assessments. So just give yourself enough time, but time box it, come up with some plans, execute. And if you build, make sure you have a plan to operate because nobody likes the shiny object jumpers that build and then nothing actually sticks.
Yep. I agree. Cory, I love it, man. Always good pleasure talking. I'm totally keeping in any commentary around DP, by the way, Diet DP. So it's
DDP.
crucial parts of the conversation. DDP.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
don't cut that.
Oh, no, not this is quality we're talking about. But for people who want to follow you, what's the best place to find your stuff?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. If you do that, I won't file a restraining order against you. So that's okay.
There you go.
It's Cory Bray, Corybray. And I probably won't file a restraining order against. I've never actually done that before. Probably never will. Let's hope that's never going to happen. So
Let's try not to do that, people.
Yeah.
Let's be nice to Cory.
yeah, just be nice. We'll have fun. It's great.
Just be nice. I love it.
And I've got a sales management podcast. So if you type sales management podcast into Google or your other search engine that you use for some reason, it comes up there too.
Okay. I'll make sure we have it in the show notes to make sure it's easier to find. So
Cool.
in case you're using the wrong browser or some weird AI thing, then they'll be okay.
Yeah. Sounds good, man. Well, good
Cool.
chat. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Cory. As per usual, always enjoy one, man. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to The Gap by GTM Buddy. For the latest AI tech in helping your teams execute with just-in-time enablement that converts and creates revenue, go to gtmbuddy.ai.